Full disclosure, I Googled, what's the name of this? Plenary?
Yeah, that one. That one.
Full disclosure, I Googled it today. Anyone else? No? Awesome. Just full disclosure. I heard there was not going to be music, but I wanted to get us in the mood. So get your worship hat on. I'm going to play what I know. I'm going to talk to you twice. And so my brain went first, let's talk a little heart stuff, and then tomorrow get hyper tactical. If we have enough time tonight, I've got some tactical. But I wanted to give you some kind of, I was taught I'm supposed to have a life first. I always looked for one and never liked any of them. Then I did my master's online and did where you don't know anybody, so you're typing with people you don't know. And I showed up to graduation because I wanted just to do that. And one of the ladies in our cohort gave us keychains that she made, and she had looked up verses for us and said, here. I'm like, oh, and one, I feel immediately bad going, I don't have anything for you at all. But this was my verse that she gave me that I had never read. And if I had, I'd never paid attention to it. It is now actually governed my approach, not just because it has my name in it, which is a nice part, but it governs my approach, and I want it to govern our approach over the next 2 times I can talk to you. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart, with skillful hands, he led them. I'd like to talk to you first about the integrity of heart, because I know in my heart, when we talk about money, sometimes I go, I just want more money, because it makes me feel really safe when there's money in my church banking account. I think that's dangerous. So let me tell you a parable I was told a long time ago. It's not in the Bible, so we're clear. There was a farmer who grew a carrot, so now you know we're not in the Bible. And it was the best and biggest carrot that he had ever grown, ever. So what he did is, his first thought, and what he decided to do, is he was going to take that carrot over to the king and just give it to the king. He thought the best idea for this giant carrot that had never happened before, that he never would repeat again, would be to give to the king. So he sets up an appointment with the king, however one does that. And he ended up approaching the king, said, King, this is the best, most amazing thing I've ever grown. I'll never grow this. And my first thought was to give it to you. So he gave it to the king. Then he leaves. This is what you do. You talk to the king, you don't bore the king, you don't stay too long with the king. He starts to walk out, and the king stops him. This is where he's like, am I going to lose my head, or what's going to go on? The king says, you appear to be really good at this, growing things. I have land next to the land that you just described. I'd like to give you that land, and I want you to grow more stuff. It's yours. You don't have to bring me any more, but I want you just to have it because you appear to be really good at it. He's elated. He leaves. The problem with the situation was that somebody overheard the whole conversation. And the guy's like, if that dude got a carrot and got land and linked it, and okay, I know what to do. So he shows up the next day with an appointment, and he brings a giant black stallion that it's the best he's ever bred. This is like what he does for a living. He is ecstatic about what is about to launch in his life. If that guy got land, what do I get for a black stallion giving it to the king? Gives it to the king, whole same scenario. You know how parables go. I'm not going to repeat all the words. Turns around, it's kind of like, waiting to get the gift, and he just walks out. The king never stops him. And he gets out and starts to rant outside from the king, and the king hears it, calls the guy back in and says, you appear to be upset about what just transpired. What's the problem? He goes, I need to tell you why you're upset. He said, you know about the carrot guy, right? He's like, yeah. He goes, that guy gave me the carrot. You gave yourself the horse. And that's why you didn't get anything out. And I'll tell you my heart. Sometimes when we as pastors talk about giving, talk about money, talk about funding our vision, there is a temptation that we want it all to happen for a motive that I don't think is the purest motive out there. So I wanted to be clear that I think oftentimes money can be misinterpreted. It's probably one of the hottest topics if you ever preach on it, right? Most of us don't love to talk about money. Most of us get at least 1 to 2 emails or comments after talking about money. I think it's divisive, and I think sometimes pastors we lie to ourselves and say that we're not in bondage at all to money. And I think sometimes we are. And so I wanted to set that as a tone that I hope you know what, when I share with you, we're going to talk tactical, you should do this, you should say this, you should have that. But the heart is not to find safety. The heart is that we can reach lost people. I know you know that. I'm aware of that. But the parable has helped me constantly say, I want to be a carrot kind of giver. I want to be that kind of a pastor that when it talks about how much money goes into whatever it goes into, that it's all about how can I reach lost people. My dad is a pastor, grandpa, and they always warn me, make sure you don't have too much in savings. I was like, that sounds like bad advice. What they were talking about was experience. And you and I both know that there are churches with treasure troves of money, getting absolutely wasted. Because I think it's more about security than how can we reach lost people. And I think that's important for us. I know you guys are all on the same page on this, but I've had to wrestle this. Because in our church, like you heard, I actually whittled the church down, which was fantastic. When I candidated, there were, that Sunday, but that's, a lot of people are just wondering what's going on with this person. There was 300 that day. I'm like, this looks like a fantastic church. By the time I was done with my first summer, we were down to 140 very regularly. I had moved the Christian flag, not the American flag, the Christian flag, moved it. Yes. So I know, so I probably, you guys need a moment with that. And then I heard from somebody about the church boss had been talked to somebody and things were beginning to go awry already. And frankly, the first September I was there, I went home and told my wife I was quitting. I'm going to leave. And I got to tell you, I think I started pastoring and it had a little bit to do with God and a lot to do with me. And I think that when we especially talk about this money stuff, we've got to talk about it. Now, obviously, that verse, I never do my own text, so you're welcome. And David shepherded them with integrity of heart. With skillful hands he led them. So let me maybe be diplomatic about this or not. I think sometimes in church, we leverage so much the integrity of heart. That's why I don't want to spend a lot of time there. Because most people are like, yeah, we're supposed to have good hearts. I know a lot of people with good hearts who shouldn't even drive a car, right? I think a lot of times also in church, that as we look at our hearts and we focus so much on our hearts, that we're like, it's so important to have a good heart, that we literally drop the leadership, skillful, how do I do this, and do I do this well? And we just don't talk about it. And sometimes, okay, in the Wesleyan world, if you're Wesleyan, you know, sometimes we even devalue that. And we say it's not spiritual. The problem with it not being spiritual, it's there. And so you have to say, it's of some value. And so what I want to do is talk about both, where we're guarding our hearts and we're making sure that our hearts have good intentions and good motives, but also at the same time, which I think you can do this, we all can do this with our brains, say, I think I can talk about and think about both at the same time, making sure that I'm on the right track for the right reasons, but I'm also running a train and working on the train in ways that we're going to get to where we need to go when we need to go there. So, with all that said, I'll tell you our approach as a church. I want to try to tell you stories of what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. But I want to tell you our approach. And again, it's in Scripture. I'm going to read it to you. You don't have to look it up. It won't be up there. And it's a long Scripture. So just listen. It'll have a vibe. Genesis 26. When Isaac planted his crops that year, he harvested 100 times more grain than he planted. For the Lord blessed him. He became a very rich man, and his wealth continued to grow. That's where we would just love to stay and say, God, please do that. He acquired so many flocks of sheep and goats, herd cattle, and servants that the Philistines became jealous of him, so the Philistines filled up all of Isaac's wells with dirt. Haters. These were the wells that they had been dug by the servants of his father Abraham. Finally, Abimelech ordered Isaac to leave the country. Go somewhere else, man. You have become too powerful for us. So Isaac moved away, where he set up their tents and settled down. He reopened the wells his father had dug. See, I hope you get the vibe. Dirt thrown into wells, now he's reopening some. He reopened the wells that his father had dug with Philistines and filled in after Abraham's death. Isaac also restored the names Abraham had given them. Isaac's servants also dug in the Jordan Valley and discovered a well of fresh water. But then the shepherds from the same valley came and claimed the spring. This is our water. They argued over it. And so Isaac named the well Argument. Not very creative, sorry. Isaac's men then dug another well, but again there was a dispute over it, so Isaac named it Hostility. Abandoning that one, Isaac moved on and dug another well. This time there was no dispute over it, so Isaac named it Open Space. And just so, I'm just going to say, if you keep reading this passage of Scripture, dug a well, got filled in, dug a well. What I think this is, I think it's a very good description of ministry. Where you know the Scriptures that link Jesus being the living water. I think it's a fascinating way to approach funding your vision. That ministry is digging wells, but also fixing wells. Also looking at what currently goes on and how it goes on, and is it effective? Is there water still there? Is it drying out? One of the most things we do in ministry is we wait for it to completely dry out, and then we don't move on, because it's got a name. Someone named it. When I showed up at Fountain Springs Church, I remember going into the sanctuary, and this was awesome. You might have it. I don't know how to be nice sometimes. So on the wall, there was what I call the bowling plaque, and I'm sorry if that is great. We had bowling plaques, and basically names of people and what they had bought the church. Sorry, they said they gave it, but what they had bought and purchased. And when we showed up, that was the church. My health insurance was paid by an individual in the church. Sounds nice. No, it wasn't. It was called slavery to that person. That was the agenda behind it. In the West End Church, you know that we have a TAC or a USF, generosity, whatever. We give money to the denomination, and that was not budgeted. That was paid for by an individual in the church, and would only be paid for once an email got, and then a phone call, and then a meeting was set up. And this was a repetitive behavior every single year. It was a control mechanism. So the church I got to be pastor of, and no one told me this, was a church, I'm telling you, was in love with money. And the Bible talks about this. Money was one of the major factors in our church. Designated funds were used to leverage things. Expenses were used to leverage things. It was pretty gross what was going on. Again, unbeknownst to me, and also to add to it, I had no idea what to do with it. Because as soon as you push those buttons on those people, they stop the flow of money completely, and then your job's either on the line, or the church goes back. So, digging wells. This is what I want to talk about. Here's my statement I don't want is to dig the wells God is asking you to dig. You have to fill in some of the current wells. Let me give you an understanding why I want to talk to you about this first. Because here's what I've learned, and I can't prove it theologically. Maybe Dr. Manal can. I don't know. My experience is God often withholds funds from us as a church until we're ready to manage those funds as they ought to be managed. So far, that's a regular experience I've had. So my prayers have been, God, can you save us from this? Can you provide this? Can you bring this in? And what I learned long down the road was we would have completely wasted that and not accomplished what God intended those funds to do. And so this is why I want to talk to you first about what do you have currently going on that must be stopped. Because if you don't stop it, I'm not confident God will give you the funds that you are desperately identifying need to be there and wanting to have. So here's where I'm going to give you some examples. You mentioned Easter. We used to have Easter at our Civic Center in town. The culture of our church was very inward focused. I think they knew there were people outside the building, but they didn't demonstrate any knowledge of anyone outside the building. And so at one point, really, I'm sitting in our Civic Center in an auditorium, and I'm at it was a Native American concert that a family invited Katie, my wife, and I to sit there and watch. It was fantastic. As I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, this is really cool. It was new to me. Felt like God saying, I want the church to worship here someday. Now, I'm like, I think that was David. Because that would be cool. I was like, I don't know if this is me just going, this is a really big room. This will be a lot of fun to preach in and all that. So that's how me and God often talk, where I'm wondering, is it you? Is it me? What is it? Well, that kept happening over and over and over. Is I want you to put the church there. I offer for Easter. So we didn't have the budget for it. Didn't know how to do it. But we knew God was leading us to do that very thing. So we signed up to do it. We leased it and had Easter there, and it was explosive. It was one of those, like, I thought I heard God, but wow, I really heard God. That was fantastic. It began to define our church in the community. We were known as the church that had Easter at the Civic Center. The first Easter, just to give you numbers, I hope you know my heart on this, but we had a church of about 600-700. The first Easter there was about 2,900, and we just began to go up. It was dumb the amount of people showing up. We were buying New Believers Bibles and running out of them after the first service kind of stuff. People were just surrendering their lives to the Lord, saying, here's my information, disciple me. It was nuts. And it was awesome. So then we almost nearly didn't have to advertise the thing every single Easter. We'd be like, hey, you're doing Easter at the Civic Center. We had to move it from the auditorium to the arena. And then more people showed up. That sounds awesome. That's more expensive. And then over and over and over again, we began to reach more and more people, but we ran into a problem. We felt like God was saying, we want you to be a multi-site church. And so we thought, well, we probably for Easter should start having Easter at our locations that we have. Problem is, that's not near as fun. To preach to thousands of people and gather this cool thing. Also, it was costing a ton of money. Incrementally over the years, what we needed to do and how we needed to do it began to build and build and build. And not get out of control, but now begin to limit us. It began to limit what we could do missions-wise and for Easter. And also we found that people weren't coming back as fast as we'd like them to come back after Easter. And so it's odd how it still makes me emotional. It was a well that we had to kick dirt into and say, we now need to have Easter at our location. The next year, we reached 1,000 fewer people. That was weird to do that. It almost felt like, was that what we're supposed to do? We took the money that we've been spending on renting stuff, equipment, all that, and we're able to divert it to other things. It was literally a well that we were pushing in. That's a very fresh story, by the way. So this year we'll have Easter at our location. And we don't regret it. The following weekend, we had more people than we ever had. We had more salvations at our locations than we had at the Civic Center. There's a lot of indicators. But I'm telling you, this is not like where you emotionally feel like making a decision. Is you go home and, I wept in front of my wife, and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, we're not going to have it at the Civic Center. She's like, stop crying. We started a car ministry. I don't know if you ever saw the one at Willow. I remember one time seeing that. It was like really cool. They were helping people with cars. We did an evaluation of our community and found out that one of the top 3 needs were transportation in South Dakota. Shocker, it's cold. And also, there's not a lot of people, so our bus system is horrible, taxi system is horrible. So you have to have a car. We don't have a walking culture at all. So you have to have a working vehicle. So in our community, your vehicle is a big deal. Also, we do have a bus system, but it doesn't supply transportation for second and third shift people. So what we did, we started a car ministry, and it as well began to be one of the things we were known for in the community. When you tell someone, hey, we help single parents and people who are struggling financially, we'll fix their car, give them a car, and do all this cool stuff. We had our own shop. It was the coolest ministry. You probably have one where you're like, this is just cool to talk to other people about. It was always fun to tell people, here's what we do about cars and meet people where they're at. The problem was it began to dominate what we were doing for outreach. For lack of better words, our portfolio of what we were doing became extremely limited. So now we have a problem. So we had to send it off on its own, and we helped make it a 501c3. We created a funding plan to lower the funding over the course of years, and it no longer was ours. If you've ever had to do that, it's really tough, but that was a well that we had to say, not ours. Most painful one was staff structure, and it's not necessary for me to go into a ton of detail here. As our church grew, as our church began to say, here's the vision we have, we had the wrong people in the wrong places, and we had people who were incredibly better fit elsewhere. And recently, he knows, he's given me permission to talk about this. This past couple of years, hired a guy right out of college when I moved to Rapid City. And he's been with me, for lack of better words, for almost the whole 12 years. He was our youth pastor, and things were fantastic. As he began to do great things, we began to elevate him, and we changed our structure in the process. And we found that the structure was not ideal, so I actually had to tell him, I need you to take a lower position. I was sitting at Ruby Tuesdays, because that's where I have those kinds of conversations, right? I don't know why. And I remember literally breaking his heart. Afterwards, this will make me seem emotionally unstable, and that's okay. Afterwards, got done with Ruby Tuesday, broke his heart. He has a less authority now and all that. I went home, sat in my garage, didn't want to get out of my car because I just broke one of my friend's hearts, and that just sucks. And Katie comes out and thinks, why are you in the garage with a running car? And I was like, no, that's not it. So she's like, do you want to come in? I was like, not really. I'm going to run down to Sonic and get a Coke real quick. Emotional eating. So I went to Sonic, and here's what happened. As I was driving through the Sonic drive-thru, I started wishing I worked there. Literally worked there, not worked at Fountain Springs Church. I sat at the window waiting for my drink, going, I could do that. And I think I can get that right. No one's even going to yell at me. I can get that right. And I remember wanting to be done with it. This is what filling in those wells makes you feel like. And this is why a lot of churches don't fund the vision, because we don't make those kinds of decisions. I want you to know the real gravity of the emotions behind this, because sometimes we talk about, especially in these formats, here's what I did, A, B, C, D, go do it. And you don't know, the times I wept and doubted and had relationships at work change, and board members go, I'm out. That Eastern Pacific Center, that first one, I had a split board. Some of them stayed away praying against it, and some prayed for it. That does something to you. We call it, creates leadership wounds and stuff like that. But again, if you're going to fund the vision God has for you to do what you're supposed to do, and you're unwilling to make those decisions, there is the lid to your church, and I think there is the lid to what God's going to pour into the church. And what I have learned in this latest season of pastoring is your church is limited by your bravery, your courage. It just is. That's the skillful hands kind of talk. That you need a good heart, but you also have to make sure that you're making the right decisions. And here's my guess. Most of us, I bet, know the right decisions to be made. We typically get to that place pretty quickly, but then we begin to doubt, justify, argue against ourselves, and land in a delayed fashion of leadership and obedience. And then we have problems, and then some of us just say, you know what, I don't even want to make these decisions. I'd like to leave this for someone else. And we leave. And someone comes in and says, well, these aren't problems I created, so sweet. And they make the decisions, and you look back and be like, yeah, that's what I was going to do, and that's what I was thinking about doing. And if you don't want to leave where God's called you to be, you have to have courage to say it. Let me tell you, we live right by a military base. I'm used to it on my face. I keep hitting it. So I love military stuff, and we're getting a new bomber, and it's so cool. If you don't like the military, but they're really cool looking. When we moved from propeller planes in our military, like that's the way it used to be if you know your military history. When that pilot would need to eject, it was not a complicated process. That plane wasn't actually going crazy fast. It was like normal fast, and that was great. So they would they would hop out, right? And there's a parachute and all that worked great. The problem was when we made jet fighters, a whole new list of problems when a pilot would need to eject out of that plane. Speed was the biggest one. The pilots weren't used to going that fast. And so when they began to practice, which I don't know any of the details of practicing this, but that sounds horrible. The problem was the pilots were so afraid of that speed that they held on too tightly, and the parachute behind them couldn't deploy out like it's supposed to. So trial run after trial run after trial run, kept messing up, and they couldn't do it. Because the pilots, in their fear, were not on purpose really, so they had to go to the engineers, because that's who you go to, hey, we can't change this dude's fear, so engineer something. And that's quite literally what they did for fighter jets. They engineered a system that where when a button would be pushed, it would force the pilot forward, no matter what they're holding onto, and would allow the parachute then to get deployed as it's supposed to. I think that's a leadership lesson. When you're too afraid to do it what you're supposed to make the decision you're supposed to, what are you going to engineer now that will push you forward and allow you to make the decisions you're supposed to make? For me, they're conversations with people. I have regular coaches in my life. I just got back meeting with a group of pastors who have similar churches as Fountain Springs Church, and we met, and we all left with bravery. We literally left with mechanisms to okay, now we're going to do the decisions that we've all been delaying. By the way, it doesn't matter what the size of your church is, you're always afraid to make the right decisions. And so you right now need to engineer the mechanism that's going to help you actually make the decision. Sometimes it's these conferences where you go to a conference, you go to something, and you leave going, I know what I need to do. But what's going to push you forward to do it? Big deal. Put here, this is something I've had to learn in recent years. Never fall in love with your vision so much that it ruins reality. So I've never been a lead pastor of more than one church. So I'm still learning, just to give myself a little freedom here. And I remember the first phase. It hurt, but was somewhat fun, because there was a bad guy elsewhere. Sometimes didn't even have a name, he just would blame others. Now that I've been there for enough time, I'm having to fix what I built, what I led to, what I circled the wagons around for. If you crave, if you feel called by God to be where you're at right now, don't let your lack of courage compromise that calling. Because I love long-term ministry. I'm a fan of it. I love the concept of being in a community where you actually know the leaders and they know you and you're able to influence people. I love that approach. I'm not saying it's the only approach. But if that's something that you identify with, you're like, that's what I would like to do, that's what I feel called to do, then you're going to have bravery. I want to turn in a little bit, because I think, yes, we do have time. So this leads you to decision making, because there's things that you have to fill in, repair. One of the things we had to repair, one of the wells that was broken was our kids ministry. We put wrong leaders and didn't give it the attention that it needed. So some wells, do not just go home and say, hey, this guy said we need everything that's broken, just leave it. Just walk away from it. No, some things have to be repaired, but that's all connected to your vision. Some of you are like, we're a missions-oriented church, so that helps you understand your wells. Well, once you decide what needs to go away, well, then you're going to be compiling what we call a budget and putting that all together. Now, here's what we're going to do. And here's where I've run into an error. It's the difference between faith and risk. When you begin to build your budget, I made a slide. The difference between faith and risk. So when you go and you're like, all right, here's the things we got to axe and get away or fill in or whatever terminology you want to use, and you're like, okay, here's what has to change, here's what has to be different. Once you get that, you start dreaming, you got this vision, and then you're going to have to weigh the next phase is what is faith and what is risk. I think in our Christian world, we often think risk equals faith. Because it's risky, and we look at it, yeah, no one's done that, no one's doing that, that's faith. I'm not going to bother teaching us on faith. You know what faith is. Bottom line, it's listening to God, doing what God wants. That's faith. Oftentimes our budgets and our funding approach is more risk-oriented than faith-oriented. So, you'll give me freedom. I want to share something with you that I'm working on right now. So again, Dr. McNall, help me make sure that I'm being consistent and accurate. As you know, Jesus was tempted. If you've ever looked at the different temptations and studied them, this is the particular temptation where it basically, I'm going to summarize, hey, jump off and you're going to be saved. And this is going to be amazing for you, Jesus, to do this. Kind of show who you are, show the power, do all that, jump off. He didn't. I think it's an idea of risk versus faith. I find it fascinating that a lot of times budgets, or at least what I was taught in school, was that the best budgets have faith built in, which means next year, out of faith, you should anticipate having more money than you did this year. And if you don't do that, you don't have faith, and you're going to go to hell for that and throw the whole church away. To tell you what I was taught, was that if you didn't increase, and it was more optimism, or here's what we think can happen, here's what we're processing, you're not close to God. So, faith, risk. So, let me walk you through what I'm learning. This. God's vision is a side hustle. You know what a side hustle is, right? Okay. So as you begin to fill in the wells or fix the wells, and you're like, all right, we got God's vision. I want you to know it's not a side hustle, which means the vision God has should be included in your budget. I'm speaking as a pastor's kid who grew up in church, where oftentimes our budgets were operational, and then we started talking about what God really wanted to do and see if we could raise the extra money to do that. I think that's dangerous for a church. I think you have to look at what if I could look at your budget right now and tell you all about the vision of your church. I think that's the way it ought to be. But it's not what I grew up with. I grew up with where missions was disconnected. Anything cool youth related, disconnected. Anything just amazing was disconnected. And what if our budgets, and I'm even talking about building things, what if our budgets could be designed in such a way that what God wanted us to do wasn't considered a side hustle, that maybe we can get some extra time to get to and do extra energy to get to? So one thing for missions, our missions is inside of the budget, for lack of a better word, missions or outreach or whatever you want to call it. We do what's called Love Week, where it wasn't new to us. You guys have heard, it's everyone, I feel like does this now, but we do a mission trip to our town. We don't raise money for it. It's built into the budget. Everything that we do, all the projects are built into that, and it's in the budget so that the budget communicates what God asked us to do, and that was to be a church to our city, not just a church to other cities and nations. And so it's in the budget, and we built it that way. Another thing is camp, youth camp. Usually, at least nowadays, our camp keeps rising every stinking year. And then we live in South Dakota, so we bus people everywhere. So camp now, I was told lately, our camp is $400. If you want to go to camp, $400. If you have more than one child, you're bad. So you see how it builds. I have 4 kids, and I'm thinking, we spread that out. So what do you do? Like literally, what do you do if you have all of a sudden 3 kids going to camp? You have a map. So anyways, we thought, well, what if we provided scholarships for teenagers? What if it was just in our budget? So where we told people, like, you want your kid to go to camp? Okay. How much money do you need? And literally different, it's not one scholarship, there's different levels. They pay some, we pay the rest, so they go to camp, so that we don't have to turn a kid away from camp. We believe strongly that the future of our particular church is bent on, we need those students to know who Jesus is, be discipled, grow up, so that just like what you were talking about, I think that's the best model, so that they stay where they're at, and we hire them and deploy them out. So it means I need them at camp, because camp is one of the most catalytic moments, especially now in a distracted environment. It's all an investment thing, so we build it in the budget. So one weekend a year, I get up and say, hey, we don't let the kids sell candy bars or cookie dough, because I would buy it for sure. But we don't let them sell stuff. They're not even allowed to. Like if the youth pastor can't, nope, not even allowed to sell stuff. I get up from the church and say, hey, camp's coming up with these scholarships. You need to give this week. We're going to end it after this week. You have to give if you want to give to this, and this is all you get. It's not even designated, just give. And it's been rising and rising, and last year was almost $40,000 extra came in and said, here you go. And we're able to send every kid that can, and sometimes even cover some of the cost of the buses. I think a budget should not include a ton of side hustles, because then what is your budget? your budget should be the mission. I think they call this the missional budget or whatever, but I just like saying side hustle. Last one. Make your budget produce cash, not just allocate it in places. This is a new concept to me. Not new to my personal finance, by the way, for those of you who are concerned. So I'll tell you the epiphany that I had to have someone else make me have, and many of you may have landed there. I didn't even know if I should share this with you, because I'm wondering, maybe all of you already do this. I was not running the church budget like my personal budget. Katie and I, we give a certain percentage to our church, we save a certain percentage, and we live on the rest, right? You know what the Bible says. I was idealistically applying it to our church. Hey, we should someday. That'd be neat if we did that, and we weren't doing that. So here is an idea. I'm just going to toss it out. What if next year, whenever you do your next year budget, you said, I want a budget that actually makes me money. Like makes you money. So the only way to do that is, what if next year's budget was 90% of last year's income? Some of you will have nope. Some of us will have to take incremental moves to get there. Incremental in income and expense. But think about your operating budget right now. Just think about the number. Hopefully you know the number. But think about the number. And imagine having 10% of last year's income in an account. Do that over the course of a few years. 5, 6 years. you're talking some cash. And what produced it was your budget. Your budget actually made money for you. And then put it in a savings account. The reason we're doing it, by the way, we want to plant churches, and we want to put satellites, and we want to put all of those everywhere they need to be. That's a long-term vision, which means I either go into a long-term, constant campaign mentality, or I create a budget that's making us money to where it's more about, we need to put this place there, so I need people, but you've already given the money to do it. And then what if you had the money to just then launch it, and the only deficit you had was leadership, was people? That's an easier problem to solve. I know a lot of us will say, no money. I think people raising up leaders, we have places like, it's there. I think the money thing is what hinders us. Wesleyans are not notorious for being amazingly generous when it comes to getting things launched and really rolling well. What if our budgets actually begin to make us money? 90% of last year's income. I suggest you have that conversation with your board, not to it, so that you can get expenses where they need to be and all that. But that's a little bit of the tactical I want to get more into tomorrow. Okay? I think that's plenty for today. So you can go back tonight and figure out how to knock 10% out of your budget and throw up in your hotel rooms. Okay. Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, Lord, I pray in the name of Jesus Christ that you would give each one of us knowledge to know what to do and the courage to do it. Lord, I pray for literally discernment on how to make the changes that I think many of us already know need to be made. Or would you give us, each one of us, a mechanism to push ourselves a little forward, to let go. Lord, I pray that you'll give each one of us rest tonight that is supernatural. Give us replenishment that we don't even know to ask for and don't even necessarily know that we need. And make us ready for a new day tomorrow. Or I imagine, Lord, you've got people that you want us to talk to. Moments you want us to fully engage in conversation with someone. I think you want us to learn tomorrow. Lord, would you make us ready for that tomorrow? Pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.